IP. However, we're not going to do that. At this point, we're just going to go ahead and leave it automatic. But you may need to change this statically to what you need. Okay, so just wanted to mention that. All right, so everything is pretty much good to go as we have it. The only thing I did is deselect IP6, which is not critical at this point. And then what we need to do now is go ahead and give the machine a computer name. So in lab, all of our physical machines in our labs are already pre-labeled. And so I have my students just match the name with what's on the label of the actual physical computer. In this case, since we're virtualizing, maybe not as important. Okay, so here we have our computer name. And this is randomly assigned by our installation. So we probably want to change this to something different. And I always tease all my fellow IT guys because we are known as computer people for not being exactly the most creative people in the world. But one way that we do get pretty creative is coming up with computer names. We've had multiple naming mechanisms at my university. I'm not going to talk about what those are right now on this video. But let's go ahead and create one. Let's call him Frodo. Okay, so those of you that are any Lord of the Rings or Tolkien viewers, readers will know where this is coming from. So this machine is just going to be called Frodo. Alright, so it says, alright, we can do this, but we've got to restart, hearkening all the way back to the Windows 95 days. And we say, yes, of course, I've been using Windows for a long time. I'm used to this whole restarting thing. And so essentially what we have to do in this case is, since we have changed the computer name by which it's referred to, we need to restart the machine. There are some changes that require a restart. So notice this was actually pretty quick. Now on a virtual machine, a lot of times on a physical machine, first of all, let me say it this way. Normally we have to press Control-Alt-Delete to log in. This is the signal that says, hey, a user is logging on. The problem with a virtual machine is that oftentimes a Control-Alt-Delete will not work because it's expecting that on the actual host machine. So if you press Control-Alt-Delete on your virtual machine and it doesn't do anything, don't panic. It's not because your keyboard isn't working. It's probably because the Control-Alt-Delete is being used usually for your host machine, not your virtual machine. So what you can do is you can go and look, and a lot of times you're going to see on your options on your virtual machine the ability to send a Control-Alt-Delete signal. So I'm going to take full screen off and I'm going to show this to you. All right, we should have this as an option as well. And I guess you can't see it on this video, but I'm going to go ahead and click the send Control-Alt-Delete signal, and it sent it now virtually, and now we're ready to log in. So here we are, logging in. Our desktop is good to go, and we can go ahead and assume everything is the same except our computer name got changed. Let's go ahead and confirm it. Notice here it shows that we don't even have to click because it says full computer name Frodo, and the work group is work group. Now we're going to leave this. We are going to promote this machine into a domain controller later, but at this point the work group option is just fine. Okay, some other things that you may want to check on, and I'm not going to spend any time on this right now on this machine in this lecture, but we may want to consider how we handle automatic updating, feedback. A lot of times for security purposes, we may be very careful on how we allow Microsoft to accept any of our data. Of course, it says, you know, this information collected is not used to identify or contact you or your company. We're not going to have a debate right now over the merits of that, but we have seen in the past plenty of companies, cough Google, that have in some cases said, hey, we're not really doing, you know, anything that's going to identify you, and later on from privacy advocacy groups we find out they do. So you can find out more about this later, but suffice to say, usually your own enterprise is going to have written authenticated documentation on how you handle this. So for now I'm just going to close this and not make any changes. And then we can also update our machine. Now let me say this, in a production environment it is critical that we update. And there are ways that we update. There are methods that we have to make updating easier and enforced and authenticated. But for us, we're going to also ignore this for now as well. Okay, we will come back to this later. And then now we have the ability to go ahead and do some things here. We can add roles. We can add features. We'll talk about what these roles and features are in a later lecture. But I can let you go ahead and look through some of these now and just see some of the options and availabilities that we can use to further customize our Windows Server. Because remember, at this point, you know, here's Windows Server, right? Yay, rah, rah, rah. You know, we've got our Windows Server, here it is, it can do some things, but really, honestly, right now, it's not doing much more than a desktop is doing until we add some roles and or features. So let me go ahead and show you some features. Here are some features, and basically there's a lot of new software additions that we can install to give us more control as well. So there is a difference between roles and features. We'll talk about those in another lecture as well. We can enable or disable remote desktop. I definitely prefer it being disabled at this point, although there are many cases where we want a Windows Server to accept remote desktop, and we would control through group policy who can access it and from what times and from where they can access by remote desktop. And then also Windows Firewall. We'll go ahead and leave Firewall on, but at one point in our class we will need to turn the firewall off for some of the changes that we'll make, but generally speaking we want our Windows Firewall to be on. Okay, so at this point we've gone ahead, we've installed Windows. We haven't activated, but we did get our time set correctly. We did configure our networking, which was already correct, and then we have set our computer name, provided a restart, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and close this window. At some point you may just want to click right here and say do not show this window at logon for the future, for future reboots, and this comes up and you don't have to specify it. But for now I'm going to go ahead and close it. I'm not going to check that because there may be times when I want this to come back up. Now keep in mind, just because we may close this doesn't mean I can't make these changes. You can always go to the control panel and change every single one of these options here. But this nice initial configuration task is a nice way to just quickly go through some of those steps and make sure you don't miss anything. Okay, the next thing that we get is our Server Manager that comes up. I'm a big fan of Server Manager. This is new in Windows Server 2008 and really nice. Very easy to scroll through to look at some of the things that we may need, quick to make changes to. Very nice for seeing our roles and features. Now again, remember, I don't have any installed, but I can click on either of these and add them if I need to. Diagnostics are right here in front of you, so we can see our full logging on our Event Manager, or Event Viewer, I'm sorry, which is very nice. We have performance information. Our Device Manager is easily accessible. If you remember, basically all these tools that you're seeing here in the Windows 2003 and prior days, all of these were available, or at least most of them, under the Administration Tools segment of your machine. If you go and look under Control Panel, you would see most of these here. However, Microsoft has done a great job at kind of adding and conglomerating all these together under what's called Server Manager. We can also see configuration for our disks, for users and groups, tasks, firewall, things like that. And then we have storage information as well, so we can handle management on our actual disk. You can see our partitions, the CD-ROM that it's showing here, even though, again, remember, we don't have a real CD-ROM drive on here, it's virtualizing, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And here's our server. The last thing that I usually have my students do, just to confirm that everything is working, is go ahead and bring up your command prompt and try a ping. Go ahead and try and ping something to make sure your machine is actually up online. So let's just do the classic ping www.google.com, and notice that we're getting a reply back. So essentially what this ping is doing is it's sending out an ICMP packet. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about that at this point. It's just a packet that goes out from our computer and tries to get out to whatever source or destination, I'm sorry, that we specify, and our destination is Google. Okay, so it worked. Another thing that you might want to do is check your network settings. So notice here is our IP settings. 192.168.251.132 is my IP, and my gateway, and so on and so forth are all set. We can see some of our other information here. Again, we're not gonna get into this right now, but do notice we do have an IP set and we are able to ping out, so we're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and exit out of this, and we can confirm that our operating system has been installed. We can confirm that it has network connections, and we can confirm that some of our basic configuration tasks were completed. So hopefully this video will give you enough information to go ahead and start an install and configuration of your own Windows Server 2008 machine at home, and hopefully also by watching this video you realize, you know what, this actually wasn't that intimidating at all. This is actually pretty easy. I can do this. Now obviously the complication can get scaled up when you're doing an install to multiple machines at once rather than one at a time, but at least from the basic settings it's really quite easy. So let's go ahead and shut the machine down. Start. We can log off, but in this case we don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and hit shut down, and notice now we need to give it a reason for a shutdown. On a Windows server, we typically don't want to just shut down. Usually we want our servers to be running 24/7 if we can get away with it. So because we need to shut it down, it's saying, hey, you need to give me a reason for this. Again, on a Windows, on a virtual machine, on a test machine, a learning machine, it's probably very common that we're going to shut it down, but in a real enterprise, not very often. So we would want to give a reason for it, and notice they have some pre-canned ones, planned, unplanned kind of idea here, and then we can simply give it a reason. Usually I just tell my students throw something in, but it does show up in the log, so if, again, in an enterprise machine, you'd want to give it a reason. So, maybe something, a reboot for hardware changes, maybe RAM, you might even reference this to maybe something in an event log or some kind of logging mechanism that ties back to exactly what happened and when and why and how. So at this point you have seen your installation of Windows Server 2008 and configuration. I hope you enjoyed this video, hope you learned something, and hope you're able to do this on your own at home.